First off, my name is Bret Wardle. I am a game designer, a software designer, an adjunct professor with games. I spent years in the game industry. I jumped over to software design games. I now primarily live in the space of education and consulting as far as games go. That's kind of where my background is. But what my passion is, which I kind of, you may be overheard earlier, is like I love games, specifically video games, but all games. Like I consume them in all types of media and forms, and I love talking about them. This is like my sweet spot of presentation, is talking about this history of games. But more importantly, why it's important to us. As we're here, we're learning about how to design games. We're talking about why games are better for learning, how they help us retain information, how they increase productivity, all of these different things. We kind of break serious play into like the serious and the play. This is the play part of the conference. This is where we get to kind of do a little more interaction. So one quote that I love that kind of prefaces this whole conversation is, history is not the past, but a map of the past drawn from a particular point of view to be useful to the modern traveler. This is from Henry Glassy, a US historian. The idea here is like you can paint history 1,000 different ways, right? Like we can paint it from any perspective we want, but it's not useful unless it's painted from the perspective which you want to tell, which you want to be useful as a guide. And that's exactly what this is. We're not necessarily talking about the history of video games and why they ended up in Congress or why they've gone different directions. We really want to talk about the history of games in the context of what can we learn from them? All of these games that we've built in the past, what can we learn from them to put into what we're building now? How can we make the things we are designing better by studying the past? As we go through the slides, you'll see each of these three icons. You'll see a controller, a little film strip, and kind of a speaker type thing. For every game we talk about, there'll be at least one of these. It is either a link to a free version to play in a lot of the old school classic games cases. It is a link to probably a YouTube video that is like a playthrough or a watch through or something like that. Or there is Listen, which is generally speaking a link to a podcast or something that is talking about this game. I use, if anyone's familiar with a podcast called Remember the Game, it is super like not safe for work language. But the thing that I love about it is just nerds getting together talking about games. It's less about the philosophy and it's more about the emotional connection that people have to these games. This idea that, hey, yeah, I played Super Mario Brothers when I was 8 years old and this is what I remember about it. This is what I love about it. These are the emotions that it invokes. So as we go through the slides, keep those in mind. All of those link out to different places because we do want to play more games. Like that's kind of my mantra is play more games. But we don't always have time for that. Like the latest Fallout game is like, you're looking at a 100-hour investment to get through something like that. And we don't always have that time. So things like YouTube playthroughs, things like podcasts about games are perfectly acceptable mediums to take in games as well. So where do we start? We start about 6,000 BCE. We're talking like 8,000 years ago. Games kind of get their kickstart, and it starts with things like stones and pits dug in the ground. They've actually unearthed Mancala. I guess you can consider them like arcades, where there's like 20 Mancala games dug into the ground where people would gather. This was a social gathering where people would play together and you jump from board to board and play other people you know and do all of this kind of stuff. It's kind of crazy to think how far games have come since then, but they have been around since then. Then we get to dice, not necessarily a game explicitly, but this idea that, hey, we are carving numbers, we are building tools that allow us to play games of chance, right? That is what you use dice for, is any game of chance that you've played, you're interacting with dice. Dice become a key element to that. Then we get to the royal game of Ur. You probably heard Dr. Cohort talk about this a little bit in this morning session if you were there. This is kind of considered the original board game. The royal game of Ur is pretty much by most considered that. And that's kind of where you kick off this idea of, hey, we have boards, we have playing pieces. I mean, this was made from rock, shell, a whole bunch of different materials, where we're putting these materials together that we know to build a game, to build something that is interactive for people. Then we start moving on to more complexity, more social engagement, more this theme of like deception and trickery kind of stuff in the game of Go. Roughly 500 BCE is what we're looking at. Highly strategic, more strategic than even some of the stuff we've previously talked about. It's less of the, hey, what am I going to do next move? It's next move, next move, next. You're looking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead in games like this. And that continues with chess. Same kind of idea. We're building more and more complexity as we go. Then we get to playing cards. Same kind of things as dice, like not necessarily, hundreds of games can be built with playing cards, but this idea that we're starting to build the tools that we need to make more complex games, using dice, using playing cards, using other types of cards. You get into like Uno and Skip-Bo and all these specialized card games. We're building the tools to make more and more interactivity within our games. And then a lesser known one, Little Wars. Has anyone ever heard of Little Wars? We got one. That's more than I sometimes usually get. This is kind of like a precursor to a lot of the tabletop games we see now. This is kind of the precursor to D&D. This was literally like tabletop miniatures, playing out wars, kind of built around this center of like learning about how you strategize for wars. And the kind of cool thing is this is H.G. Wells. Like a lot of people don't realize that H.G. Wells had a hand in games, which kind of goes unnoticed. There was an update released in 2004 as well that I think a few more people are familiar with. Then we start to get into the big board games that a lot of us know and love or hate, depending on how heated of a game of Monopoly you've gotten into. But 1935, we're starting to get more into the modern times. We kind of flew through like prehistory there, right? Now we're getting into what people know a little bit more in the form of Monopoly. Ruins countless friendships is one of my favorite taglines for Monopoly. Which brings us to lesson 1 for the history of games, right? We're gonna have a handful of these as we go through. The first lesson to kind of be had is games are as old as civilization. They fulfill basic human needs. They're not something that is, oh, I do this just because I want to have fun, or I do this because I'm told I need to do this. We have needs as humans, like socialization, like relaxation, like competition, that are met by games. Like we seek to accomplish these things, and games help us do that. Which kind of jumps us into sort of the early days of computers. We kind of have gone from the physical, tangible pieces of games into more of a technological side with the launch of computers. And you get into ENIAC, EDVAC, EDSAC, all of that. You're looking like the mid to late 1940s, right? From there, it didn't take us long. We have these giant rooms with vacuum tubes that are processing information, really meant to be sort of these tools to help us with our productivity or anything like that. It didn't take us long to take those giant rooms, and guess what we made? Games, right? Like that's one of the first things we went and did. Not the first things we went and did, but that's one of the first things we did was we started making games for these systems. As going back to like what we need as humans, like we wanted that entertainment. OXO, sometimes considered the first video game. Kind of depends on how you define video. It's more or less tic-tac-toe, or X's and O's, depending on where you're from. You're using almost a telephone dial. You can kind of see up on the top. You're using the 9 telephone dial keys to say what of the 9 spaces you want to place your piece. Kind of interesting. Again, like you have a video. I tried to find a playable one of this, but it's sometimes hard to find. But you have a video of how this plays out, and you can kind of see how the screen works. Then we get to Tennis for Two, which is also sometimes considered the first video game, depending on your definition of video specifically. This is being run on an oscilloscope is the screen you're seeing it on. That's why some people will discount it as a video game. Some people use the way you interact to qualify or disqualify. But does this look familiar at all to a game you probably have heard of? Yeah, pretty similar, right? And we're getting there. We're almost there. But Tennis for Two, 1958. Again, we're less than 10 years from those giant mainframe sort of computers. And then Space War. Again, sometimes considered the first by some. And this is almost like I view this as like a little bit of an Asteroids clone, if you've played Asteroids. The idea is you're kind of being sucked into a black hole here, and it is a working gravity simulator, is what the kind of cool thing about Space War is. There is kind of this functioning, like, gravity physics going on where you are being pulled to that center of the screen. The idea is two players are trying to shoot each other's ship. Rather than destroying asteroids that are coming for you, it's a competitive two-player game. Which again, like, we're talking 1962 that this is going on. So some pretty crazy stuff. This is, again, only available in these like mainframe computers. You had to be like a student or a lecturer like Stanford, MIT, one of these things to be able to get your hands on these. And then we start to go a little more public with something like Pong. Now we're getting into the territory that a lot of people are a little more familiar with. 1972, coin-op arcades. These Pong arcade machines, I mean, this is the actual coin-op version, 8,000 units shipped to places, which is a pretty staggering number considering that, like, this is kind of the dawn of that consumer video game age. This isn't, not a ton of people are playing this, and these are coin-op. This is pay per play. These were primarily, those 8,000 weren't shipped to homes, like people weren't buying these. These were shipped to bars, taverns, bowling alleys, like those kinds of things where people were gathering and playing other things. They were playing billiards or darts or something like that, and then they're introducing this video game to these same people. And then we kind of get the birth of PCs, which more or less starts to put like everything on steroids to a certain extent. Like these computers are now accessible to people at home. Like people can get games themselves, put them on their own personal computer, play them, share them, start to save files, start to build stuff on their own. You can kind of see some of the basic or the most popular personal computers there on the side. Limited functionality, we're talking, these are all running very, very limited scope, but it's kicking that off. It's getting people into technology, into computers. On the other side of things, you're still having the rise of non-video games. Like the video games are taking off, but we still have things like Dungeons and Dragons, 1974, and lots of like I guess attacking coming from sides of things. People, this is when you start to get that story of like, oh, are video games good? Are they bad? Like, are they ruining our youth? Are they helping our youth? Still obviously widely played today. D&D has taken a huge resurgence in the early 2000s now through, kind of died off. I remember playing D&D when I was like a teen in the 90s, and then it kind of went away for a decade or so, and now it's kind of seen its resurgent. But the other thing to keep in mind is you're seeing that, like, the reuse of some of those things we saw before. You're bringing dice back into play. Less of the cards, but you're using miniatures. You're using the stuff that comes from board games, comes from that more prehistory stuff, and building it into other games, the building blocks. Oregon Trail, 1975. One of the first, not necessarily the first, but probably the most popular of the sort of edutainment series. This is taking games and applying them to education. A pretty big step as far as gaming is concerned. Because we hadn't really seen this. I mean, I remember playing Oregon Trail that's the reason I went to the elementary library for me, was because I got to play Oregon Trail, or I got to use the original MS Paint. Like, those were like the two things that I loved going to the library for. Still ran on the Apple II. This has had countless re-releases. Like, you can play this on like almost every platform available to humankind. And I suggest you do, because it's a crazy fun game for as simplified as it is. Then we get to the first generation of game consoles. You'll see we stepped through this a couple of times in the home consoles. PCs kind of started that off. These home consoles are kind of just specialized PCs, and that continues for the most part throughout history. I mean, obviously the hardware is a little bit different. They do a little bit different things. But the idea is it's a PC that you put in your home, plug in your TV, and you play a very specialized set of games. Limited games, in some cases only one. Like, you can see the Pong machine is just for Pong. You plug it in and that's all you could really play on it. You don't have the sense of cartridges and stuff that we maybe know now. We'll get to that here in a second. But those are kind of your consoles at the start. In addition to those home consoles, or technically kind of like even before them to a certain extent, you have the arcade, that coin-op arcade is going strong. Pong kind of leapfrogged us into that. Yeah, I'll pay a quarter and play this game. That is really starting to ramp up. You're starting to see more and more of games released on there. They're going to those same kinds of things, bars, taverns, bowling alleys, but you're actually starting to see these arcades pop up, like true arcades that are filled with these cabinets of games. The Space Invaders one in particular I love. 300,000 units sold. So we go from the 8,000 of Pong to 300,000. The other thing that's crazy about Space Invaders to me, this game caused a coin shortage in Japan. Like so many people were playing Space Invaders in Japan that these machines like could not take coins anymore. They were full and like people were needing to empty them like hourly. And these coins were getting put in a back room of a bar and like stores didn't have coins because all of these quarters were being put into the Space Invaders machine, which is just absolutely crazy to me. But you see that continuing, tons of these. Another coin op, Asteroids. The thing Asteroids is probably most famous for is your first high score with initials. Like everyone kind of thinks of like, hey, yeah, I got to put my 3-letter name in when I get the high score. And everyone does ASS and it's on the top of the list. And it's like, yeah, that was cool. But that was kind of what it's known for. Again, like this is made by Atari, tons of quarters going in. The games are kind of translating slowly from, hey, what's coin op to what's home. And that's kind of what you saw. Like if we go back to that first generation, you're bringing some of those arcade games home. You're bringing Pong from, hey, I was putting $10 worth of quarters in Pong down at the bar. Well, I can just get this machine and I can play it at home as many times as I want. Or maybe I'm taking it home and practicing so that when I go to the bar, I can beat people instead of losing all the time. One of my favorites is Rogue in 1980. This is a PC game. If anyone's familiar with, you have a lot of games nowadays that are called roguelikes. That's where this comes from, is Rogue. The idea, the biggest thing here is being procedurally generated. If you've ever played Rogue on the PC, as you move your character around, these maps are procedurally generated. There's nothing that like a designer had to go in and say, okay, well, I'm going to put a room here, and then this hallway is going to go down here, and there's going to be a key, and then there's going to be this. Like, these are all just done on the fly, and that's what I loved about Rogue. I remember playing this when I was a kid and filling out the map and then printing it on my dot matrix printer to then take and use in a D&D game separately, which was, like, as I look back on it now, was like either ingenious or crazy stupid. I don't quite know which one it is, but I loved some Rogue back in the day. Then you have Pac-Man. Again, coin-op arcade. Characters that have names and personalities. These ghosts had names. I mean, a lot of people don't know them all, and I don't even know them by like the colors that they are. But you start to get these characters with personality put into games. It's more than the asteroids and the Space Invaders. Like those Space Invaders didn't have a real sense of personality. Those colors to those ghosts, for whatever reason, did that. And people, again, are just pumping quarters in here. They want to get better at the game, which leads us to lesson 2. Players can accomplish and actually enjoy difficult things. The arcade industry has baked itself on that. That idea that, hey, I'm willing to put in another quarter to get better at this game. I will pay by the play to get better at this game that is difficult. Like those, if you've ever played any of the coin-op arcades, these are not easy games. Like getting through a full game of Pac-Man or Space Invaders is like, there are very few people who can pull that off. Like these are challenging things that people will do. Players will put themselves through this torture, in a sense, for that reward. We want that sense of satisfaction afterwards. So that's kind of the second lesson to come from the history of gaming. Then we get into the second generation of game consoles. This is where some people were kind of introduced to games depending on your age. But you have the Atari 2600, which is one of the more popular on this list. The Fairchild Channel F, which I was saying earlier is like one of my favorite stories from early gaming. The Channel F is the first to use cartridges, which is my favorite piece. Like that's kind of a big leap, right? We went from generation 1 being, hey, I have one game on my motherboard and that's all I can play, to something where I can hot swap games and be able to play whatever games I want. which was really, really cool. The idea here is they're really trying to target people that wanted to play games at home. Hey, I'm spending money in the arcade. Why don't I just get one of these consoles and play this game at home? That was kind of where we were targeting with that second generation. You have games like Pitfall. 1982. This was the 2600 version that you see here. Story, character, action, and adventure coexisting. Prior to this, you kind of have that like, am I an action game? Do I explore and do an adventure game? This kind of started to mix those. And you see that like as we continue, tons of action/adventure showing up the rest of the way on this list. Pitfall kind of kicked off that, hey, we can start to sort of mix genres. We can have a puzzle game with an action game. We can have an adventure game with an action game. We can start to mix those together. And then you have kind of the boo moment in gaming history, right? This is E.T. and Pac-Man on the 2600. We talked about that second generation kind of trying to capture people from, hey, I'm spending money on arcades. Why can't I just bring this home? That's where this Pac-Man game was born. And if you look at this version of Pac-Man here from the 2600 and compare it to the one we saw just a few slides back, pretty stark difference, right? Like, people got this game home, they purchased that Pac-Man cartridge, plugged it in, we're like, hey, I'm ready to play Pac-Man. And their immediate response was like, what the hell is this? Like, this does not look like the Pac-Man I know. And they were burnt on that. Like, they purchased that game for a reason. E.T., not much different. People kind of thought like, oh, I love the movie. The movie was fantastic. I get to play, like, I get to be E.T. What do I get to do? And if anyone has ever played E.T., I argue that you probably haven't, because I don't know that there's much to play. It's kind of just like, it's fall in a pit and spend the rest of the hour that you can trying to get out of that pit. But these games, these low quality games, or I hate to call them low quality because we had what we had at the time, but from the consumer eye, these low quality games really hurt the industry. It kind of put a blemish on what was the video game industry at the time. And these two in particular, a lot of people blame E.T. I actually think like this version of Pac-Man was probably more detrimental to the game industry than E.T. itself, but it caused the game crash of 1983. The video game industry kind of just like died for a little bit. Like, people didn't want to spend money. They were bothered by what had happened, and they didn't know what they could trust. There was no sense of trust in video games anymore. And that's where you saw a little bit of the resurgence in things like D&D, board games, like a ton of the board games that you know and love were kind of born in that little span right there. Then we get to the third generation of consoles. Right around the early 80s times, you have the Nintendo Entertainment System. You have Atari 7800, so kind of their follow-up to the 2600. You also have Sega entering the race. You'll kind of see Sega has a fantastic rise and fall as we continue through this. But more or less, and we'll talk about why here in a second, Nintendo really revitalizes the game industry as we start to head into the mid 80s, and we'll talk about why. But first, Dragon's Lair, which is another huge advancement in gaming. I mean, if you look at, like, this is gameplay from Dragon's Lair. I mean, the gameplay might be defined loosely, but this looks significantly different than the rest of the games we've been looking at prior, right? This was sort of an animated playthrough sort of thing. Animated by Don Bluth, if you're familiar with animation, like a huge name in animation at the time. This was on a laser disc. So this was a movie that you more or less had what we now refer to as like quick time events, where it's like, hey, running down the hallway, left or right, up or down, duck or jump, that kind of stuff. But people were blown away by the idea that, like, hey, a video game can look like this. A video game can look like a Don Bluth animation. And it kind of jump-started this, like, no, video games can have a sense of realism. It changed the way we thought about games. Prior to this, you were looking at dots and pixels on a screen, and things were pretty low resolution, all things considered. And Dragon's Lair kind of changed that. Then we get to Tetris in 1984. Tetris's like story continues for like a decade, but 1984 is when it was introduced for PC. This is another one that's like, you can play Tetris on every platform you can imagine these days, but like literally crazy addictive. There's the like Tetris movie. I don't know if anyone watched it, but it tells a way better story of how Tetris came and went and still is than I could ever do in the time we have. But crazy stuff, crazy legal battles, crazy rights. It really shined a light on how we do rights for video games across North America, Asia, wherever. But highly addictive game. And then we get to Super Mario Brothers. One of the things I love here is this Nintendo seal of quality. We talked about Nintendo saving the industry. That Nintendo seal of quality, in my opinion, is the reason why. That seal of quality showed, or their goal was to show consumers, hey, we as Nintendo have approved this game. It is of a quality standard that we say is fit for consumers. And that built trust back. Like, that built the trust of the consumer back. They were burnt from the Pac-Mans, the ETs. That Nintendo seal of quality kind of earned back a lot of that trust, combined with really, really fun games. I mean, Super Mario Brothers, we jumped to Legend of Zelda, another Nintendo franchise. These were really high quality games compared to what else was potentially out there. They were longer playthroughs. They were something that was different than the coin op that people had been playing. It was this sense of like, hey, I have a save game. I might play this over the course of a couple of days. I mean, at least in the case of Legend of Zelda, you had a battery save. On Super Mario Brothers, you didn't. It was one playthrough. And you would just like trick your mom that your Nintendo wasn't on by putting a piece of electrical tape over the light so that you could come back after dinner and finish playing, or at least I did. But that's what we were kind of looking at, is these bigger, more expansive experiences. Metroid, same kind of thing, like open world with gates. The sort of Metroidvania games, as they're called now, all kind of like born out of this era. And I would argue like Super Metroid, even more so when you get the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So Nintendo and that re-rise of video games kind of brings us to lesson 3. Quantity will always lose to quality. Like, quality always trumps quantity, right? Like, the idea that, hey, we don't want to build as many experiences as we can. We want to make our experiences amazing. That will always, the quality of what you build will always last longer than the quantity of what you build. And you see that the gaming industry now is kind of like, it's been a rough couple of years in the gaming industry. And you're seeing that. Like, quality is sticking through, and studios that are building quality games are staying around. And even studios that build quality games aren't staying around. Like, we're closing studios even when they build quality games. So we kind of have to know, like, hey, always focus on making things good as opposed to just making as many things as we can. We get to the 4th generation of consoles. TurboGrafx 16, Sega, Super Nintendo. So you're kind of getting down to what you would consider sort of the 2-horse race for a while. This was a Sega Nintendo battle for a good chunk of time, at least through this generation. I mean, TurboGrafx was there, and I think I noticed if you haven't checked out, like, in the lobby, the like game preservation table. I can't remember who it is, unfortunately, but they have like a Vectrix there. I swear I saw a TurboGrafx was there. Like, go and check out some of those games. I live in this gaming history space, and I've probably only been able to play a Vectrix in real life like twice in my life, and they have one on that table. So if you haven't, go and check it out, because you never know when you'll get to see one again. But Super Nintendo, Genesis kind of run away with this. It doubled the visual quality from 8 to 16-bit. And it was the introduction of optical media as well. We came to CD-ROMs out of this generation. Along the, behind the scenes, PCs are also continuing. I mean, we kind of neglect where PCs are in this space. PCs are always continuously evolving as we go through this. And PC gamers aren't disappearing. They never have, and they never will. But it's kind of just continuing its line. In addition to those consoles, we have the Game Boy in 1989, and this is kind of the kickoff of, hey, I can take these games with me now. Like, I don't have to play it at home, plugged into my TV. I get to go and do this on the road during a road trip, or in some cases you take it to school or whatever you needed to. And the other thing that was kind of interesting with this is Nintendo decided to package this with Tetris instead of Mario. Up to this point, everything was Mario. You bought an NES, you got Super Mario Brothers. You bought a Super Nintendo, you got Super Mario World. There were obviously like some other packages in there. And so everyone kind of just assumed, oh, a Game Boy, I'll get Super Mario Land, which was the Mario game of the time. Nope, they put it with Tetris. Any ideas on why? Market. Like, yeah, the screen. A lot of this was, they wanted to not only appeal to kids, they were trying to target an older demographic. They were trying to market it to adults, specifically in Japan. They wanted Japanese businessmen and women to take this on the train, to take it to work, to play these little games. They know the kids sometimes don't have the money to buy these systems, but the parents do. And if the parents can not only see, this can entertain my kid on a road trip, but can give me something to do on the train, they're going to sell more systems. And was probably instrumental in the Game Boy being wildly successful in doing exactly that. Sonic the Hedgehog, 1991. This was Sega's answer to Mario. They kind of said, hey, you guys have Mario, cute, fun, family-friendly plumber. Like, we're going to have this, like, kind of faster, cooler, like, more hip character in Sonic, and that's how we're going to attack your market share. I love the phrase, like, this is literally their marketing phrase, Sega does what Nintendo don't, which was brilliant. I mean, it got people, as gamers were aging from the NES to this 16-bit era, they were getting older. They were kind of getting sick of sick of Mario and Kirby and some of these. Like, I'd rather have something like a Sonic, and it worked really, really well for Sega at the time. Like we mentioned, PC, continuing along, you have Myst. Defined sort of the point and click puzzle era. This is like a pinnacle game of this, like, hey, I can click on something. It's not quite fully like a 3D world, but it is a 3D rendered world. And the graphics look amazing compared to some of these other games we're talking about. And it's point and click and puzzles and storytelling. Along the same lines, we're still continuing with non-video games. Magic the Gathering, 1993. Huge market, kind of kicked off the trading card game market. You see a ton of other TCGs come along after this, and Pokemon and some of the others. And it really popularized that idea of we can have these physical cards that we not only collect, but we use in game, and it built these economies of, hey, if I have the money, I can go and pay for a deck that wins, which is kind of an interesting concept that you still see. Chrono Trigger, 1995 on the Super Nintendo. One of the highest rated RPGs of all time. The thing that I love about it specifically is it was non-linear gameplay. Up to this point, everything was fairly linear. You tell your story, you play through your game, just kind of in that straight line. 10 different endings in Chrono Trigger, which a lot of people don't realize, like you could get all these different endings. But really, really fun game. Continuing board game, Settlers of Catan, another this is like the continuation of Monopoly, right? This ruins friendships and flipping tables and all that kind of stuff. I've had too many heated games. I won't play Catan anymore because the people that I would play with, I just can't play those games with anymore. Heavy strategy. This is combining kind of everything. You have dice, cards, pieces, everything kind of coming together into one sort of game. Pokemon Red Blue in 1996 on the Game Boy. Gotta catch them all, right? That was the idea. Is hey, you can't stop playing until you have caught all of these little pocket monsters. It was addictive in that way. You did feel like you need to catch them all. The other thing that I love about Pokemon is you kind of see here, this was an omni-channel experience. There was Pokemon TV shows, Pokemon toys, Pokemon the trading card game, Pokemon the movie, Pokemon the Game Boy game, Pokemon comics. Pokemon was an omni-channel experience. It was the first time you really got into that heavily. You had the Super Mario Super Show and some of these other things were games were starting to dabble their way into other media, but Pokemon really, really kicked it off. 1996, the Tamagotchi. The thing that you would constantly kill when you went to school, right? You kept it alive until you had to leave for school and then it died. Again, gaming on the go. This isn't even necessarily, the Game Boy was that sense of gaming on the go. This is not even gaming on the go. This is gaming consuming your life, right? This is I need to keep feeding my little pocket creature or it will die. This was almost a turning point. If we're here talking about addictive games, remember the year 1996, because I do think it shifted the psychology of gaming in Tamagotchi. Which kind of brings us to lesson 4, not necessarily Tamagotchi, but that idea that, hey, we can have PC games, we can have trading card games, we can have board games, we can have little electronic devices that hook on our gene loop. Know your players. Tons of different game mechanics out there. There's tons of different game styles. You need to know who's playing your game, who is consuming your game, what they enjoy, what motivates them, how do they retain information. Tons of studies out there to kind of learn who that is, try to learn who your core gamer is, but pay attention to it. You need to understand it. I'm going to start going really, really fast because I can tell I'm already behind on time. 5th generation. Now you get the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar. Atari kind of reemerges for a little bit. Atari could have a whole presentation itself on like the rise and fall of Atari. I think there's a movie about it. You still have Sega, you still have Nintendo, but you kind of get the entry of another player in the game, in Sony. The first Sony PlayStation is part of this generation. 30 times the memory increase. We went from 128K in the last generation to 4 megs. These consoles ushered in 3D gaming. Like that's kind of what they are known for. And you see that Super Mario 64 in 96. Popular IPs going from 2D to 3D. You see it in Super Mario 64. You see it in Zelda Ocarina of Time. This is kind of the march from, hey, we now have the graphical capability to build these 3D worlds. We can use 3D models. We can navigate around this world and do that. You also have Crash Bandicoot in 96. This was Sony's answer to Mario. Just like we said, Sonic was Sega's answer to Mario. Crash Bandicoot was kind of Sony's answer to Mario. And it was the same kind of thing. They were attacking Nintendo as childish. Like, hey, you can buy a Nintendo if you want. It has these childish games like Mario on there. If you want real games, buy the PlayStation. We've got Crash Bandicoot. And there's an ad, you can look it up on YouTube, where they like dress this guy up as Crash, and he's like outside of Nintendo headquarters with a megaphone. It's like one of the most classic gaming ads of all time. Super Mario RPG in 96 as well. You're seeing Mario, you kind of have this like Super Mario blank. It was everything. Super Mario Kart, Super Mario RPG, Super Mario Tennis, Super Mario Bowling, like whatever it was, it's just, well, we can slap Super Mario on whatever we want and it'll sell 1 million carts. And to a certain extent it did. The key thing here is this was Nintendo intellectual property, but developed by Square, who was famous for RPGs. Like that is what Square and Squaresoft did, was build RPGs. So Nintendo kind of said, hey, you do this really well, we do this really well in the intellectual property, like let's bring those two things together. You see that continue. Super Smash Brothers, 1999. Pushing to an older crowd, it's like, hey, what if we threw these Nintendo characters that we have into a fighting game? What if we said like, okay, like Mario's neat and all, and you're jumping on guys' heads. What if Mario is punching people? Like, could we appeal to older people then? It worked. The more important thing is they started adding non-Nintendo characters. Again, you're getting this sort of cross-pollination of ideas where it's like, hey, we have this idea, we have a platform, we want your characters to be part of it. And so they add it. Which leads us directly to lesson 5. Know when to build, buy, or partner. When you're building these experiences, is it more beneficial for you to go and use something like a Fortnite and say, hey, we want to build an experience that is a 3D experience, but we can't build a 3D engine. We can't release something on Xbox. We can't do this. Like, should we just be using the Fortnite editor to tell our story, to create our experience, do something like this? Or should we go and buy an engine? Should we go and buy the Unreal Engine to build this if we can't do an engine ourselves? Start to have that conversation, because that's an important part of building these experiences, is knowing, hey, where should we spend our resources? We all have limited resources. Should we spend it in partnerships? Should we be purchasing technology that helps us accomplish this? Or should we just be building it our own based on the budget we have and reduced scope? 6th generation of consoles, you get the Dreamcast, which more or less is kind of a death blow for Sega, which is unfortunate because it was just ahead of its time. It was like the first console that had online connectivity, which kind of just fell under the radar, which is kind of sad. You have Sony in the PlayStation 2, you have Nintendo in the GameCube, and then you see Microsoft enter the race. So this is kind of that last generation of like, okay, we're the big four, as I like to call them, are duking it out, and only three of them survive this battle, really, in Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. Online connectivity, these are made primarily of PC parts. Again, like we're just building specialized PCs, especially in the Xbox. Like it's literally a PC that's just kind of running an OS over the top. And the console war starts to thin out. Diablo 2 in 2000. The thing that I love about Diablo and Blizzard in whole is they kind of took this approach that some people weren't, in saying like, hey, our games are done when they're done. Going back to that quality over quantity, Blizzard will always take quality. Well, I guess I can't say always, but up until about the 2020s, Blizzard always took quality over quantity, which was good for them. I mean, they're still known as a good game developer, outside of some sketchy like handling of their people. The Sims, 2000, again, a PC game. The thing that's great about The Sims is they did not have a target demographic. The Sims were like, everyone can play The Sims. Like, we have something for everyone in this game. If you like making people, you can build people. If you like building houses, you can build houses. If you like playing games, we have gameplay. It doesn't matter what you like, we have something for you in there. It was a life sandbox, more or less. And it starts to blur the lines between game and play as well. Like The Sims is a play simulator. There was less game at the time and more of just that like, hey, I want to get in and play. I don't need the structure that some games give me. Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2001, hugely successful. The thing that kind of came out of Grand Theft Auto is publishers and game makers alike kind of realizing like you need that sort of power of a key franchise. You need a staple. You need a Mario to succeed in this world. You need the Grand Theft Autos. You need the Sonics. You need those because they're sort of your staple. And you still see that to this day. Some of these staple games are still released yearly or bi-yearly, just to kind of keep that ship afloat. Halo in 2001, huge leap in multiplayer games, as well as the soundtrack. Like a fully orchestrated soundtrack in Halo, one of the first games to do that. World of Warcraft, which we heard about this morning as well. Not the first, but probably the most successful MMORPG. Tons of people playing World of Warcraft in 2004. Also one of the first to do subscription services. Like one of the first games to kind of say like, hey, rather than charging you $60, I mean, I think at the start they actually still did charge you $60 and the subscription fee. But, but the idea is, hey, we're switching the payment model. This was kind of the first to do that. And you see that a ton now. You see tons of subscription models. The other thing is like a full industry event. You have BlizzCon centered around World of Warcraft and Blizzard games. Roblox, 2006. User-generated content is the big thing here. Like Roblox doesn't build these things themselves. Users build everything that you do and play and see in Roblox. And that kind of leads us to lesson 6. Build systems rather than throwaway experiences. The more you can build systems that either users can generate content, other people in your departments or companies or whatever it is can generate content, you're getting value year over year from that. Rather than just saying like, hey, we're going to build this experience that when we're done with it or the technology fades away, it goes in the garbage. We've built this system that we can continuously update it. We can continuously work on it. 7th generation of consoles. Microsoft 360, Sony PS3, Nintendo Wii. Again, PCs are still going strong, but we've kind of whittled this down to 3 home game consoles, and that's where we stand today. Like, we haven't really changed from the mid to late 2000s to now. It's those 3 are the big players. Wii Sports, this was motion controls like it game. Like when motion controls had this rise and fall, Wii Sports was responsible for that sort of rise and fall. It also created a flood of low quality games that might sound familiar. If we go back to that like early 80s, you kind of saw that same backlash. Nintendo is still facing that backlash from the Wii just getting a ton of shovelware. They still haven't built that back. The Switch is starting to get there and people are like, okay, Nintendo's back in my good graces, but it wasn't before the Wii U like came and went and died in a fire that started to happen. Sneak King, 2006. I don't know if anyone remembers this game, but you got this game when you purchased like a Burger King meal. And this was kind of the birth of advertainment. Like the idea here being like, hey, not only are game companies making games, like, I mean, we're all here, not many people here at this conference work for a game company. Like, we are all here building games to advertise a product, to train, to teach. Like, you're starting to build that sort of advertainment space, edutainment space. Like, games have now moved their way well past video game players. Doritos also had a game. Mountain Dew has had games. Tons of these advertainment games. Farm Bill in 2009. This turned gaming and the gaming demographic on its head is pretty much all I'll say about Farm Bill. Farm Bill changed the demographic of who plays games, for better or worse. I argue for better because there's significantly more people playing games, which is awesome for me and us and all of us, but it did change the way that we make them. It also kind of popularized microtransactions, which may or may not be good. I'll leave that up to you. Minecraft, 2009. Originally PC, now it's everywhere. This like reset the benchmark for what sales numbers could be. Minecraft still to this day is considered like, this is what the most popular, most successful game in the world looks like, is Minecraft. People still go back to it. It's 15 years old at this point. People still playing. I play Minecraft probably weekly still with my kids. Like this is me and my family's like, hey, what do we want to do together in the video game space? It's always Minecraft. It's always, let's hop on the realm and build something. Let's hop on the realm and go down, let's go down into a cave. Let's hop in the realm, go to the nether. Like, let's do something in Minecraft because we can all get in, we can all chat, we can be in the same room, yet still in this real world space. As my kids have gotten older and moved away, that realm is still there. Their house is still there. I haven't redecorated their room, but when the time comes, like their room will be redecorated in our house, but their house in Minecraft will still be standing. They can always go back to it. Lesson 7, kind of directly from Minecraft as well. One person and an idea can change an entire industry. Like that is what Minecraft did. It upheaved the entire video game industry because Notch had this idea of, hey, I think this pixel art idea where you mine for resources and build stuff with this resource, like it can completely change the way that we do things. Roblox, same thing. Like, what if we built a system that everything is user generated? Like, those ideas can change an entire industry. 8th generation of consoles. Again, we're still just at Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. This is kind of the jump to 4K resolution in this generation. Better hardware, but nothing new. We haven't really changed. I mean, this generation and the next generation, which we'll see, we're really just increasing the hardware. We had motion controls previously. We had these technological advancements. We're kind of in a like technological stalemate outside of like the VR, AR space that's going on. Candy Crush. 2012, mobile devices. This kind of brought mobile. We have the Game Boy, obviously, but we're now playing on the phones that we use every day. We're consuming this media on something that is in our pocket all the time. Highly addictive design. There's been studies on like how it is addictive, how it causes you to spend money. I would argue for worse, like this isn't good. This is basically where the Farmville, like the demographic for the Farm Bill shifted to the Candy Crush. Like we went from Facebook games directly translated to this style of mobile game. Pokemon Go, 2016, one of my favorites. I still play Pokemon Go like all the time. This was most people's introduction to AR. Like most people had no idea what AR was, how it worked, what it was capable of until they saw someone playing Pokemon Go. It required you to get out and explore. That was another thing. Like, if anyone remembers that, like, summer of 2016, like, that is the closest I think we will ever come to world peace, unfortunately, is that idea that, like, you could hear, like, I'm from Salt Lake City. Like, I remember being downtown and just hearing someone say, like, oh, there's a Dragonite, blah, 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 and crowds of people would, like, chase down where this Dragonite supposedly was and try to catch it. And it was just this magical summer that I wish every day we could see happen again. So hopefully someone here at this conference can get us back to that prolific time of gaming. Ninth generation consoles, still a 3-horse race. Well, technically a 2-horse race because Nintendo hasn't entered this generation yet. There's whispers that like early 2025 we'll see. Some people think that it's gonna be holiday of 2024. We're way too late for that. 8K resolution, again, we're like doubling that processing power. SSD memory caching, so again, we can build bigger, better games. Just technological improvements. You also see the launch of game services in 2017, the Xbox Games Pass, Nintendo Switch Online, PlayStation Plus. Games kind of go SaaS. Games kind of adopt this SaaS model that roughly 20 years ago, software was like, hey, what if we just charge people per month? What if us as Adobe, instead of charging $1,300 for our suite, just charge someone $50 every month? Games are starting to go that way, and you're seeing more and more of this. With that comes sort of the rise of free-to-play. You see more and more games that are taking that sort of free-to-play stance. I know we have Epic here, so I'm not going to talk too poorly about that. But like that is Epic's whole thing. Like Rocket League, completely free-to-play. Fortnite, completely free-to-play. Fall Guys, which they purchased, completely free-to-play. You're just paying for these enhancements, which is obviously a completely viable model because they're like raking in money. It's just a matter of what your players prefer. Kind of going back to the one lesson, like know what your players prefer. If your players want to shell out $60 and get everything, then build it that way. If your players are fine with microtransactions, build it that way. This is a lesson that like EA can't seem to learn. And I worked for EA for a number of years, but they can't decide whether they want to charge you $60 or charge you a monthly fee or charge you microtransactions. So they just do all of it. And that's why people hate EA, because they can't decide what they need. And there are different franchises. They're like, people will pay $60 for Madden if you don't microtransaction them. People will pay microtransactions for The Sims if you give them the base game free to play, but they can't find this mix of like which one you want to do. Beat Saber, 2019. VR headsets, this is kind of VR's it game. Like if you've played VR games, you've played Beat Saber, right? This is like the game everyone's like, oh, come try my VR, try Beat Saber. That's what you always go to. Song Pack DLC is now popularized. That's how they're kind of making their money, is just releasing these song packs at bits and pieces. This Girl Does Not Exist in 2022. Is anyone familiar with this game? It's a little bit of an under-the-radar game built completely using AI. The art, the music, the story, the narrative, the dialogue, every piece of it is fed into the game via AI. Nothing was created by a person. No piece of art, no piece of music, nothing was created by a person. That's kind of a shift you're starting to see. You're starting to see game developers harness the use of AI to build these experiences. And quite honestly, I think it's probably responsible for what has happened in the game industry in the last couple of years. We've lost it's approaching like 100,000 jobs in the game industry have been lost to AI, to efficiencies in code. Lots of different things could probably be accounted for that, but this kind of stuff is out there, it's being created. It's a shift that we are seeing in the industry. Which takes us to lesson 8, which is simply technology moves incredibly fast. Whatever you are researching today, whatever you are studying, whatever you are building, it will be gone by the time you release. Like you have to know that. Game companies have had better or worse luck with understanding this, but the game building cycle isn't cheap. It doesn't happen fast. By the time you start a game and the time you release it, enough time has passed that technology will change. So keep that in mind as you're doing research, as you're looking at other competitors or looking at other games to inspire yourself with, keep that in mind as you go. So, as a recap, flying through all of the lessons we learned, games are as old as civilization. Players like hard things. Quality beats quantity. Know your player. Build by partner. Create systems over single-use features. One person can change an industry, and technology moves quickly. That's kind of the takeaway from the history of games. I mean, we went through almost 80 games. Those are kind of the things to take. The one last lesson I will say, this is kind of my mantra. You heard it mirrored this morning. play more games. As a game advocate, as a game historian, I'm sometimes dumbfounded by how many people I talk to in these other spaces where it's like, oh yeah, like what you're building sounds a lot like blah, 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 blah. And we were like, oh, I've never heard of that game. And it's like, well, what games did you play or what games have you studied to build this experience? Oh, we don't play games, we just make them. It's like, okay, well, you're probably doing it wrong then. Like, we need to, if we are building these experiences, if we are trying to understand why people play games, we have to play them. Like, I'm saying that like prescriptively. Like, we need to get out and play games as an industry. So please do so. And then my, everything that you need for me is on here as well. That's my LinkedIn, that's my TEDx talk, like everything that is about me is on that link tree. I'll leave that up to scan. We'll take whatever questions we have. I think I have 4 minutes for questions. If you don't get to a question, I'll be right outside this room. I've got to clear out so that other people can get in, but I'm happy to stick around outside of the room and answer whatever questions we might have.
I'm just curious about some of the things that you like left out. Like Nintendo choosing to put games in the boy aisle of toy stores was why games for many years until, as you pointed out, Farmville changed the demographic.
Yeah.
Or something as simple as like the collapse of that games industry in 1983 is what led to that.
In my drafts of this, like there was a point where I was at like 250 slides.
Sure.
And then I had to give this presentation in 45 minutes instead of the hour. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to work. There's tons of stuff out there. You're absolutely right. There are huge moments in gaming that were not in there that are super influential. So yes, you're absolutely right. And my justification for what's in there is honestly like, I don't know, because it fits the lessons. I chose the games that I think fit those lessons better than maybe others.
I was just kind of like, you did mention the game.
Yeah.
I'm sure why you didn't mention that element.
Fair.
I love the fact that you talked about watching games as another way to consume games, because I'm an occupational therapist. I like using games for therapy, and I can't play horror games because I'm a little baby.
Yeah.
But,
No.
but I love the experience of watching streamers play horror games, so I can relate it to other people who want to use that in their own like realm of things.
Absolutely. We're a media-heavy society. Yep.
Yes, please. If you don't spend the time playing it, you just want to understand the mechanics behind it, just go on Twitch.
Yeah, we have Twitch, we have YouTube, we have countless ways to consume games as media.
I want to say the history of Spaceport is wild. Like the multiplayer in the startup IP is related to that. World of Warcraft predating social media, so their numbers going down once Facebook came out because people were using it just as for the chat.
Yep.
And my last thing is, if I say Sonic Ass Game, do you know what I mean that?
No, and I don't know that I want
That
to.
was the working title for Crash Bandicoot.
Oh, really?
Because it was a real
Third person? Yeah,
third
that makes
person.
sense. That makes sense. Well, I learned something today then, for sure. So.
I was hoping you were going to bring up in terms of modern innovations what Xbox Game Pass has kind of done for the industry. I'm curious because that has been tried before, right? Game Tap is kind of the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
In your view, where is it just technology? Is there something about the adoption of free to play that has made it so Game Pass has become what it is, a behemoth in the industry, whereas Game Tap totally died?
I think timing. Like, if I were to give my opinion, it's all just timing. It's the same reason why, like, Netflix, like, was doing okay, and then they went like, oh, well, what if we just, like, put these online and we didn't have to do this disc exchange? Like, you just never know where that timing is. And, like, the Dreamcast is a perfect example. Like, the Dreamcast was a phenomenal system that was released 5 to 10 years too early. Like, I think Game Tap is that same kind of thing. Like, it was probably released because it predated Netflix subscription. It's that same kind of thing. Like GameFly somehow succeeded in that Netflix space, then died. But like same kind of thing. Like if it would have been released now, we'd probably be talking about it alongside all these others. Anything else?
I think it was Russell.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, You gave us a lovely history over the past like 100 years or so. If you were to give us one prediction over the next 5 to 10 years, what's the first thing that's going to come to mind?
I mean, I think it's gaming. We've already talked about it, but it's gaming infiltrating every other space. Like gaming, I mean, we talked about video games and the history of these games that we think of as games. Gaming is everywhere now. In the next 5 to 10 years, everything is going to be centered around that. And it's us here at this conference that are the shepherds of that to a certain extent. Like we need to be like careful with where we put games. We need to be careful with their design and the addictiveness of it and that kind of stuff. But like that's what I would say is like the idea, I mean, it already is, but even more so, games will continue to encompass our entire life.
Thank you.
I mean, real quick, just simple. What do you think when they dug up the Atari landfill? How did you feel? The speed of where to put games.
All I thought is I would love to get my hands on one of those like dirty copies of ET. But I don't have the money to get my hands on one of those, as much as I would love to. That's a huge piece of gaming history that I would love to, that is more valuable to me than like owning one of the like NES World Championships cartridges. I would love to see a landfill copy of ET in my hands. Go. Any other questions? Thank you. Stickers still down here. Grab them on your way out.